But I spent 2 years with the Special Air Service and had a thoroughly fascinating tour there, as I'm sure you can imagine with the Special Forces. It's an interesting group of people and a very, very interesting methodology and ideology, because if you go to any pub in the United Kingdom, there's always a fat bloke in the corner that was the bloke on the Iranian embassy balcony, wasn't he? In every pub in the UK. When you actually meet these guys, you know, they're a fascinating bunch of people, very self-effacing, and actually they come in all forms, you know, tall, short, fat, thin, intelligent, and actually not stupid. They're usually quite right. But they all have this one quality, which is actually quite endearing, and it's resilience. It doesn't matter what you throw at these people, they will just basically, you know, head down and go for it, and they just keep going. And that's the sort of the thing that I took away from those people. They're incredibly resilient, and whatever their mission is, even if they don't have the tools to accomplish it, they'll just basically find a way of getting through, which in today's climate is obviously quite relevant. So that's all good. I had a fascinating time there. And then when I finished, our postings branch, our sort of human resources branch, if you like, in Glasgow, it tends to be manned with the comedians from the armed forces. So they basically have a look in your file and then, you know, chuckle as they send you to somewhere that's completely mismatched with your abilities. So I get seasick just by looking at a glass of water. So they sent me to the Special Boat Service for 2 years to go and do some maritime counter-terrorism. And it was all very interesting. I managed to overcome eventually my seasickness. But we also thankfully had a secondary role supporting police firearms teams as well. And at the time it was teaching them how to deal with suicide bombers. So I came and spent quite a lot of time in Edinburgh as well, working with the police firearms teams here. And then after that, was developing that whole suicide bomber piece. And I'm sure some of you will recognise this handsome chap up here, Richard B, the shoe bomber. Well, on the night that my second daughter was born, I had a pager message on my phone saying there's a suicide bombing incident in Glasgow. And I just got back from the hospital, opened a bottle of champagne with family and friends at home while my wife was in hospital with the baby. And I obviously thought it was a joke, because at the time, you know, we couldn't move for suicide bombers in Glasgow. So I left it and carried on drinking, and then went back to the kitchen. There was about 13 missed pager messages there, and I realised there must be something serious. And it was actually this guy here. So we went in on the evening of my second daughter's birth. We went away and did this arrest operation and got him. And in typical police fashion as well, we went to the wrong address as well. We went to the house next door, kicked down their doors. Had to apologise, and then when we went into the correct address, and all these terrorists looking really startled at how stupid the police were. That was really interesting. And I spent a year with MI5 as well, doing covert bomb disposal. And that's basically, you know, when you hear of these bombs that have been placed on the streets, and suddenly the terrorists have all been arrested and the bomb hasn't gone bang for some reason. It's because we've gone in there, done some jiggery pokery, and then basically just, you know, allowed the operation to run so we can build up evidence and arrest them. So they're all interesting times, but as you can imagine, you know, being married to somebody who's been doing all those sorts of jobs, it's not really conducive to, you know, a newlywed couple, and certainly not to a couple with 2 children by this stage. And EOD is explosive ordnance disposal, but it's also known as everyone's divorce because of the pressures on the families, you know. So after a bit of time of doing all this, I came back and my wife said, either get another job or get another wife, because I've really had enough. So I went and spoke to my commanding officer and explained the situation, and he said, no problems at all, I'll give you a posting for 2 years as a training officer. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you'll be based in the barracks with the occasional weekend exercise. You know, so I thought that's great. And I was about to go and tell my wife the good news, and he said, as long as you go over to Colombia for a few months and train up the Colombians for me. So I had to go out to Colombia because these guys, again, like IRA, they've been claiming to go out there as eco-tourists looking for interesting flora and fauna. They also happen to be the leading water bomb designers for the IRA as well. And coincidentally, while they were out there, President Uribe on the night of his inauguration had 180 water bombs land on his palace, so he was a bit miffed with that, obviously. And he'd been to college with Tony Blair, knew him well, so phoned him up and said, can you send some of your bomb techs to come and train our guys in how to deal with these new IRA-inspired devices. So that was all good, and eventually, when it was all over, I came back and thought, okay, I can start some sort of normal family life again. But instead, I was told I was going to do the world's most dangerous job in the world's most dangerous place, which is bomb disposal in Iraq. So I found myself on a particularly ropey Royal Air Force flight, touching down in Iraq, and I then went to go and meet my new team. And basically, when you're a bomb tech, it's just you on your own, really, from your own unit, if you like, and then you maybe occasionally have a number two, an assistant who's also trained in ammunition and explosives. But other than that, it's normally made up of other units from the British Army, the guys that make up the team. And if you think about it, how many people in the room, by the way, are managers here? Are you all in some form of managerial functions? Quite a few of you, yeah? Well, imagine if you're in a very busy operational environment and somebody from an external organisation says, you've got 700 people in your organisation, we need you to send one person to somebody you don't know for 6 months just to go and fill a spot. Are you going to send the best person in your organisation to do that in a busy operational environment? No, of course you're not. You're going to send a director to your organisation. So every single commander sent their worst person to make up my team. So it was like the Dirty Dozen. These guys all had criminal records, they all liked to fight, they hated officers, which was fun, and that was my team basically. So very, very, from the outset it was all about leadership. And the one thing I found was, just treating them like human beings, which seems to be sometimes an alien concept in some aspects of the army. Treating them like human beings, treating them with respect and dignity, and actually giving them ownership. When I said to them, forget about the reasons we're in Iraq, WMD, all that stuff. We're here to actually stop bombs from killing anybody at all. And the majority of bombs that are out here are actually killing innocent civilians. So you can go away, whatever anybody says when you come back from this war, whatever finger pointing people do to you, you can come back with your head held high because you've actually saved people's lives. And they loved it. And from day one they became really engaged, and we started building that team, which is quite nice. And something that I know is important to all of your hearts, and especially with that, is the idea of accurate and timely intelligence. It's something that's really important. And as I mentioned to you, when we were working against the IRA, they become the world's leading bomber for 30 years. Within a year of this insurgency, just as I arrived there, the insurgents there had superseded the level of sophistication the IRA had taken 30 years to achieve. And so it was very, very important that we got to grips very, very quickly with what was going on the ground. And I'll just show you an example of a typical day in Baghdad, for example. You can see this truck up here, and then the truck disappears. So we had to very, very quickly see exactly what was going on the ground, take it all in, and rework our procedures, our tactics, and our techniques. And obviously, I'm talking about dealing with pressure and dealing with risk. I'll just give you an example of what it's like, to sort of work in that environment. When I went out there, day 4, we were supposed to have, all British servicemen were supposed to have 2 weeks to acclimatise. It was 50 degrees Celsius in the midday sun, but there just weren't enough operators for us to be able to do that. We had commitments all over the world. So I went out there, and on day 4 I was told, that's it, you're on the team, you're taking over the team. And on that very same day, I went out on my first job. And it was a bank of rockets, pointing at our divisional headquarters actually. A lot of people said I should have just let them fire up and we would have been home by Christmas. And they were stuck on an electronic timer, a mechanical timer, with 1 minute left. It was like a James Bond movie basically. And we couldn't get a robot up to them because of the terrain and the heat. So I had to go and do the long walk, as we call it, the walk up to the bomb. And just to give you an idea of what it's like, basically it's that moment at which the visor comes down in front of you, the drawbridge goes up behind you, and suddenly you're on your own. You're taking a walk of maybe 200 metres, it feels like 200 miles. And you've made some sort of plan, but it's an improvised explosive device, so you don't know what it actually is, how it's designed to function. You need to do all that when you actually physically get there. So you make a bit of a plan, and then basically you've just got to go with it. And in my experience, life is like that, isn't it really? We can make all the plans in the world, but as soon as we actually then commit, all the variables start to take play, and then things start to change. So literally every step you take towards that bomb, you're constantly re-evaluating. And it's like a game of extreme chess. It's like a game of extreme cat and mouse, if you like. It's not just you versus the bomb, but it's you versus the bomb maker. You've got to try and get into his mind and identify what's he trying to achieve here. Is he trying to kill civilians? Is he trying to kill member of the security forces? Or is he actually in place something there more sinister to lure me in so he can kill me with a hidden device, if you like. So there's lots and lots of pressures all the time as you're doing that, as you can imagine. And sometimes it's a bit peaceful as well, because at least you don't bother thinking about all the day-to-day nonsense that goes on in your life, like paying bills and what you're going to cook for dinner and that sort of stuff. But it does tend to focus it when you arrive at the bomb itself. So that was literally my first day on the job there, 4 days into arriving in theatre. And I managed to neutralise the bombs, which is good, but I hadn't acclimatised, so I managed to keel over and collapse after neutralising the bombs and woke up in a medical centre tent with all the photos were fake as well, to make it even worse. And we've been out the next day. I think the team and I had done 3 bomb incidents that day, including another rocket fight where we were the day before. And then about 11:15 that night, we eventually came in off the ground. We went out at 8:15 in the morning, came back in at 11:15 at night. We were all very, very tired. We were driving along with 3 vehicles. The first one was an armoured Land Rover, and I say the term loosely because it's got about as much armour as a packet of crisps, basically. You know, they weren't that great. And then those Land Rovers where, have you seen on TV where the 2 soldiers pop out the top with their rifles and sort of do a mobile sentry thing? And then we had these 2 6-wheel trucks, which were just unarmoured bomb disposal vehicles, basically, all our equipment in. So we had 4 guys in the front, and then my driver and me, the number 2 and me, and then we had two other soldiers in the back in our electronic countermeasure vehicle. We were driving along, minding our own business, nothing really unusual or untoward. And then there were lots of men sitting at the side of the road, outside their houses, smoking shisha pipes, drinking tea. Again, nothing unusual or untoward. But you know that moment at which the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, when you sort of sense impending doom? Anyone that's lived in Glasgow will know exactly what I'm talking about. But you know that sort of moment when you sense some sort of some fear, something's just going slightly wrong. That's exactly what happened to us. We were driving along. These 2 guys just stood up and just ran into their buildings. And suddenly, you know, you felt that sort of that cold shiver go through your spine. And to give you an idea of what it's like just driving through there on a day-to-day basis, you know, even in daylight, when there are so many peripheral threats, whether it's from bombs or ambushes. I'm just going to show you a bit of video footage to give you an idea of the set and scene. So it gives you an idea, and that's exactly what happened to us. It was dark, we were driving on at night, I was busy chatting away to Dan, my number 2, and then suddenly these guys just ran into the building and something didn't seem right. And at that moment, a grenade was thrown at our vehicle and exploded on Dan's side, luckily not mine, and there was a big bang. And then that was suddenly followed by lots and lots of automatic machine gun fire on the right-hand side of the road. And the rooftops basically had these guys lying in ambush waiting for us. And all the guys that were outside drinking tea suddenly pulled out their Kalashnikov rifles and started shooting at us. And that was followed by a volley of rocket-propelled grenades as well. It was the most terrifying moment of my life to date. Because basically, if you don't prepare for something, then it's very, very difficult when you're under extreme pressure to actually respond. And I'll kind of put that into context, if you like. In the military, you train and train and train as a soldier. You learn how to attack things, you learn how to defend things, you use live ammunition, but you can never really replicate an ambush because obviously health and safety would never allow someone to start brassing up loads of machine guns and firing rockets at you as you're driving along the road. And therefore you can't really replicate that realistically, and so you don't build up any muscle memory. And what happens is, when you're under extreme pressure, you get a lack of oxygen flowing to the front of your brain, to the frontal cortex, which is the part of our brain responsible for vision, creativity, and that sort of thing. Instead, it then goes to the back of your brain, which is your limbic system, the muscle memory. So, to sort of put that into everyday terms, I guess, when you wake up in the morning and you're in a rush, it's still possible to, for the men to have a shave, to do up your shoes, to do all the things that we do every single day. We can still do those things. But sometimes when you're under extreme pressure or under time pressure, you can't necessarily think straight. And I'm sure, many of you, when you were, junior members of your organisations, if you met someone very, very senior, you're all alpha males and females in the audience, I'm sure very articulate, you might have found yourself unable to actually string together a sentence because you felt overwhelmed by the presence of somebody that you consider to be superior. If you've met a VIP or a celebrity, you may find the same thing. Going out on a date with someone that you really fancied or something, find yourself unable to actually say something coherent and sensible. Anyone ever done any of those things before? Just me. Has anybody ever had an argument with someone the next day or an hour later said, I wish I'd said this or I wish I'd said that? I'm sure we've all done that. It's exactly the same thing, only a little bit more extreme in that environment. So that's exactly what happened. I'd always assumed that I'd be this Churchillian type leader and a warrior, having spent 4 years with the Special Forces, actually all I wanted to do was pull up in the footwell of my vehicle. I was completely rooted in terror because I just didn't know what to do. And it seemed like it was hours, but actually it was a millisecond or two. And as the oxygen started flowing to the front of my brain, my body told me that I wasn't yet dead. I was then able to start thinking of something to do. So I just basically told the guys to drive as fast as they physically could out of the ambush sites and to start engaging targets. I don't really witty conversation. So that's what I did. And it was all quite cheeky, as you can imagine. You know, lots of gunfire, very, very terrifying. But somehow we managed to fight our way out, and we got out to what we call a rendezvous position, or a lay-by, and we parked up at the side of the road, and there was the snatch, and our body exposure of it was behind. And I got on the radio to one of the guys in the front, to a Scouser, and no one has names in the Army Net region, so I just said, Scouts, can you see everyone we all here? And you know, when you see on the movies, people have these, you know, in combat, they have these firefights, and they have that sort of 1,000-mile stare at the end of their combat, you know. The reality is it's nothing like that. If you're like Zippy on speed, you've got so much adrenaline coursing through your veins that you're literally just bouncing off the walls. So I said to this scout, you know, can you do a quick head count and make sure we're all here? And he was like, fucking hell, really, really excited. So I tried to translate it and realised, you know, that we were actually all alive, which was astonishing because everyone's supposed to be killed in these things, you know. So it was an amazing feeling to know that we got out of this. And then Dan, my number two, had been driving with one hand on his shoulder like this, and getting out of it. And I said to him at the time, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine, boss, you know, I'm fine, just getting shot by loads of people. So I sort of, you know, started doing my business and engaging the people that were shooting at us. And then when we got into this position, I checked that everyone was there. I said, are you really alright? He said, no, I think I've been shot actually. And I said, you know, I think I have too. And you know, we've both been shot as well. But the adrenaline, you know, you couldn't really feel it. And it wasn't actually, they weren't bad injuries, just those great ones that you can talk about to your grandkids and your motivational talks and stuff. So that was nice. And then he said, do you mind if I have a cigarette, boss? And I was about to be really alien attentive and say, no, you're not allowed to smoke in military vehicles. And then realised the stupidity of that. So I said, and then I said, I'm going to have one too. So I lit one, and then suddenly had this guilt complex because we were smoking in a military vehicle. So I thought, I'll just wind down the windows. Realised there were no windows left, you know. That was a nice uplifting moment. And then suddenly that sort of elation went to gut-wrenching fear as scouts came back on the radio and said, I've made a mistake. The vehicle behind is still there, it's still in the ambush. And it was the worst feeling of my life because I suddenly thought, you know, these guys are going to be utterly helpless. There's nothing they're going to be able to do to get out there. And all our communications equipment had been shot up in the ambush, so we had no way of calling in any support or even letting anyone know that we'd been ambushed. And we were still a couple of kilometres away from our headquarters. And I thought, the sensible thing here is 75% of us, 6 of the 8 of us are alive, is to go back to the camp when, you know, basically we all should have been killed. You know, we've got 75% success, it's the way forward. But there was something just niggling me, just saying, you know, if we do that, we're going to leave these 2 guys behind, and there's nothing they can do. So I decided at that moment, you know, and I'm not a brave person, but clearly I am stupid. I decided that I would have to meet the families of these 2 guys at some point, and they'd say, you know, they'd look in my eye and say, there's everything you could have done. And I'd probably have to turn around and say, well, actually, yeah, there was, but I didn't do it. And I thought, whilst it was the right thing to do now, probably further down the line, I probably wouldn't be able to live with the decision that I was made. So I decided there and then that whatever happened, I was going to go back in and try and get them out. So I had this sort of epiphany, and I decided to speak to the guys in the team, and I was going to say to them, look, I'm not going to order you to go on a suicide mission, but I'm going to ask you who wants to come back in with me. Society, they always talk about the younger generation being, you know, worse than ever before, but actually it was the exact opposite. You know, they were absolutely fantastic. They'd only been a team for 5 days, and they were all prepared to go back in there and risk their lives to get their mates out on what was certain to be a suicide mission. But thankfully, we didn't have to worry about that, because what actually happened was, out of the smoke and dust of the ambush, the second vehicle came driving out at about 10 miles an hour, and unusually the staff sergeant, the sort of senior guy, was driving it, and the young private soldier was in the passenger seats. And what had happened was, as we were driving through the ambush, they were both grinning like Cheshire cats obviously as well, because they were still alive. What had happened was, as they were driving through the ambush, an insurgent had come out with a rocket-propelled grenade, and he fired it at them from about 8 metres away. And these rockets, as they travel through the air, they need 12 metres of free airspace to get the arming mechanism to work, so that they're armed, and then when they hit you, they explode. But because he only fired it from 8 metres away, it didn't actually arm. but because they're so fast, the kinetic energy is, it hit the vehicle, it knocked the gearing mechanism out, and they got stuck in second gear. So they went from sort of driving quite fast, and me saying on the radio, you know, drive as fast as you can, to suddenly being stuck at 10 miles an hour. So as they were driving to at 10 miles an hour, when we were speeding off, you know, in the distance, the staff sergeant turned to the young private and said, you know, feel free to start shooting somebody, won't you? And he was so overcome with terror at this, you know, impending certain death, he decided that he couldn't physically bring his weapon up. So for some bizarre reason, the staff sergeant decided to turn the headlights off, like that was going to make a difference. And the insurgents were so shocked at the sheer stupidity of these two lunatics that apparently they just lowered their weapons and shook their heads in utter disbelief and gave them complete free passage through the ambush sites. So, you know, we ended up somehow, all 8 of us, coming out of it alive with just a couple of bullet holes, which was amazing. So that was the 5th day into our tour. So it's a bit crazy. And I'll just share some of the insights really from my career and from that particular tour before I finish the presentation. One of the things that was obviously essential for us to succeed was suppressing our fears. And it's something that all of us in everyday life have to encounter, and embracing the challenge. It was always, you know, the answer is yes, now what's the question? That was the sort of mentality that we had there. And the other idea was the idea of weighing up your options. You know, probably the most sensible thing to have done would have been to leave that ambush and certainly not walk up to anyone actually in an ideal world. But it's all about weighing up the options, isn't it? And continually re-evaluating the information we've got so that we can modify our plan. And that's something that's always helped. Never just jumping in with both feet and never being completely inflexible and saying, well, this is the plan, we've just got to stick with it now. It's taking in all the intelligence and changes all the time. And something that I noticed throughout my career was this idea that everybody fears change and everybody fears failure. And it was something that, you know, all the alphas that I used to work with in the military, you know, they used to be so affected by it, and it used to curtail their success. You know, everything in nature evolves, and yet people don't like any change in an organisation, they become set in their ways. And it used to really curtail people because they didn't want to move forwards. And similarly, this idea of failure. If you look at anybody in the world who's been truly successful, it's all based on the back of failure. You know, Edison, 10,000 attempts to make the light bulb. You know, the Beatles were told by the Decca recording company that you know, they didn't like their music and guitar music was on its way out. How wrong they were, you know. And the idea is that people just allow this fear of failure or criticism or ridicule to curtail their success. And that's something that we just didn't care about at all. You know, everyone thought we were idiots for what we did, and therefore fear of failure didn't really feature in our day-to-day running. And all of us visualise this outcome. We all visualise getting back to our detachments, opening the bottle of contraband Scotch whisky that a reporter had kindly brought out to us, and having a little celebratory drink for still being alive at the end of the day. And for me, certainly, listening to my gut instincts, every single mistake I've made in my life, and there have been numerous, has been because I've actually failed to listen to my intuition and my gut instincts. And comparatively, virtually every single success is because I've gone with it, when I've not been able to sort of, you know, think of a clear option, certainly. And having this inherent belief in everything that we've done that we'll succeed, and that we're not going to fail at it. And of course, never losing sight of your aim. So those are all things I'm sure that all of you do in your day-to-day life anyway, but there's certainly the core of the lessons that I learned in my career and the things that kept us alive at night too. And thereafter, we went out day after day. The very next day, we had to drive back through the ambush area, actually. And we just did lots and lots of bombs all the time. I mentioned to you about not wearing a bomb suit because it was too hot. And we ended up doing 45 bomb incidents in the first 8 weeks. So it was quite a busy period. And I know that spotting patterns is a theme that's very important to Barrachd and its clients. And it's something that was essential for us as well. We realised that actually lots of people were focusing on detecting and defeating bombs, but actually there were so many being replaced, literally potentially thousands being made and replaced every week in the country. It was a futile effort. The idea was to look at the patterns, to build up the forensics, the DNA, and actually go left of the boom, if you like, shoot the archer, not the arrow, if you like. So we were trying to find out with these finite number of bomb makers were with the requisite skill sets, because if we could remove those from the streets, then actually there wouldn't be any bombs on the streets and it wouldn't fuel the insurgency. So that's what we started shifting our focus towards. But of course the downside of that is that as you start getting closer to the insurgents, they don't really like it. So I then went into the intelligence office one day and spoke to one of my Scottish pals, and he was the head of intelligence, and he said, they put a price on my head. And I was obviously a bit sort of taken aback at that. And they said, my hair goes very blonde in the sun, so they want to kill the golden-haired bomb man. And I sort of giggled a bit at that and then realised actually I was the only bomb man in Barrachd, so obviously it was definitely me. And I was a bit sort of taken aback, went for a run and then put it all into context. Actually, we all had a price on our head, so really it wasn't really worth worrying about too much more. But every day thereafter, we went out on the ground, there was always something sinister lying in wait, something not quite right. And we always had people from one of the terror organisations that were watching us, watching our every single move. And there was a radio control bomb put out one night, and I had to go and walk down to that, knowing that at any moment the trigger man would have fired it off. All I had was this little box of jamming tricks to stop it from functioning. I walked up to it, so that was quite nice. And it kind of came to a bit of a head, and I'm entitled to making snap decisions, so I know something else is important to you, and I've almost finished now. But it came to a bit of a head when these insurgents, one group in particular, they watched every single move that we made, and they started learning our procedures. And they knew that if there was a chance of a mass casualty incident, we would have to dispense with the bomb suit and dispense with the robots and go and deal with it by hand. So, all the sort of politics aside, what effectively you had there, you had two groups, you had Shias and Sunnis, and they both hated each other because the Sunnis were very much aligned with the former, Saddam Ba'ath Party, and the Shias were, the oppressed population, if you like, before Saddam had been ousted. And they hated one another. But the only people they hated more than the British Army were each other, basically. So the Shias put a car bomb outside a Sunni A&E hospital, and they put a car bomb in there designed to kill me. And when I was tasked to go and deal with it, I thought there's something just not quite right about this, And they knew I'd have to go and deal with it by hand because there were 1,000 people in this hospital. And I thought, there's no way on earth I'm going to go and do that. So what I did was I jumped over the wall, here, ran into the hospital, and said, can you all evacuate to the back of the hospital, please? And nobody spoke any English. So I then remembered I had a 9mm translation tool, a pistol on my thigh, and I waved that around a bit, and then they all spoke fluent English and went to the back of the hospital. And I got Dan to drive the robot down there and said, to everyone, you're just going to hear a small pop, we're just going to shoot open the boots and get inside and neutralise the bomb with the robots. And after I said you're going to hear a small pop, this is what we heard. And the car exploded. When you open the car door and the light comes, the courtesy light, they wired the detonator into that. So if you open the boot or the car doors or anything like that, then the whole car bomb would explode. There's about 300 kilos of explosives in there, designed to kill me. So that was that. And then we've blown up our $1.5 million robot. So Dan, the immortal lines, well, I'm not paying for it. And then, hopefully. And then we had this sort of real Sanders rugby type there, desperate to go and check on the well-being of the patients in the hospital. And I said, just wait for the smoke and dust to settle, It's like, no, gotta go now. So he went running down the road, and I thought, well, I'm going to go with him, So I followed him down there, and he kicked open the first set of double doors, kicked open the second set, and was running through this hospital, and eventually came to this ward at the back of the hospital with 1,000 patients and visitors crammed into it, and said, is anybody in here injured? And this Iraqi surgeon in perfect greeting said, yes, of course, this is an A&E hospital. No response from the bottom, so that was no good. But after that, I was asked to move on because I was such a risk to my team. Personally, it's because I blew up a $1.5 million robot, I believe, and was told to go and be a staff officer, a desk officer. So imagine going and sort of hands-on, and we built this amazing team of weeks as well. We were very, very close. We've been through a lot together. Suddenly to then go into work in the divisional headquarters of the desk officer. And I had to remain driven and continue to try and achieve the unachievable in that environment. And I remember the Sergeant Major once said to me, don't look for the next opportunity, but when you have in hand is the opportunity. So I thought, right, I'm going to change my job description. So when the outgoing Chief of Intelligence left and the new Chief came in that I was working for in this intelligence role, he said, so what do you do? And I said, well, I'm not like any of the other desk officers here. I actually go out on the ground all the time with the infantry, kicking down doors, making arrests, and getting intelligence on the ground. And then I come back and write reports. Oh, well done, carry on. So that was great. I basically lied blatantly and rewrote my job description and managed to get out to the ground. So we did some more work, and eventually it came good. We found some bombers in place of a device, and we went and questioned them. And it's not like you see, on the less favourable press, let's say. We don't even do so much as the Chinese huge egos. And when I told this guy out personally that he was the best bomb maker I'd ever seen in my career, he suddenly thought I was his best mate. And he said, "Oh, I've got to show you this design." And he drew this diagram, chatting about bombs, you know. And it then showed me, you know, through this pattern analysis that he was our bomb maker in the north because there was a certain signature with his devices, if you like. And we got his forensics in the DNA and proved that he was the bomber in the north. And because I was so, you know, thrilled by his technical prowess, he then told me about, you know, comparisons to the other bomb teams in the city, and then inadvertently told us where the other bomb team was in the south. So they are 101, we went and kicked out some more levels, and the rest of the second bomb team. So we managed to remove 2 of the teams from the streets anyway, and at least, you know, stop some of the flow of bombs. But that really is the end of the presentation. That was our 4-month tour. Give you a snapshot of a slightly different career, and just really to summarise what I said, you know, suppressing your fear, embracing the challenge, weighing up your options, accepting rather than fear change, not fearing failure, visualising the outcome, listening to your gut instinct, believing you'll win, and never losing sight of your aim, which for us was literally to go out there and stop bombs from killing innocent people and then coming home to our families.